Good morning. So my talk is really like three talks rolled into one. First, it's a look back on how Skype was made, because a lot of people want me to talk about Skype, so I'm going to do that. Second, it's a personal story on how I ended up caring about so-called existential risks. And finally, it's a sermon to people who aspire to be technology developers on the 21st century. So feel free to choose your own adventure, so to speak. Before I start, though, let's watch a video that was prepared for a Skype internal company meeting, because it's about dangers of letting me speak.
It appears that Skype uses a secret weapon to curb any resistance within the organization, a biological weapon called Jaan, Tallinn. Here you see it in action. At first, Skype employees seem to be alert and possibly rebellious.
We have run out of beer.
Can I borrow you some?
Then Jaan Tallinn is introduced.
The things that I mentioned to myself were Skype year 1, Skype year 2, Skype year 3. And then I tried to extrapolate that. So what came to my mind when I said Skype year 1? For example, personally I had a bug in the client that caused a certain condition, and the condition was that by the fact that Ahti thought that, all right, perhaps I should do just one more test. So that was another sobering experience. Actually, second pretty important thing. I'm not sure how much you were aware of that. So, okay, next, year 2. I think.
The power of Jaan Tallinn is also used in corporate videos.
Hello everyone, I'm Niklas and I'm here with Rajiv. Our users
As if watching corporate leaders for 40 minutes isn't truly torture enough, every 25th frame of this web address contains a hidden message.
So what I wanted to do was to take this opportunity to update all of you on what's happening with eBay's businesses as a whole.
Having seen this, all employees worked for 11 months without a single visit to the lavatory.
So now that you have been warned, let's proceed to the presentation. My goal today is to convince you that as the power of technology increases, so does the responsibility of technology developers. And not necessarily in some abstract way, but in a very concrete think before you push that button way. First, the future is fragile, because to a large degree it is shaped by individual actions of a surprisingly small number of people. To show what I mean, let's zoom right back to the year 2002. There. A small group was celebrating the news that their software was declared to be responsible for the majority of internet traffic. The party took place in a small apartment in an old Soviet-style apartment block in Tallinn. This one. I'm, of course, talking about the team that built Gaza, the software that became the king of file sharing after Napster was shut down. Less than 2 years later, a largely overlapping group was posing for a Fortune magazine cover story. Because the photo crew had arrived after dark, the group had to stand motionless in freezing Tallinn December night. Their latest creation, Skype, was less than 4 months old. 1 year before the photo shoot, Toivo, who later became the head of engineering, sent the following email to Niklas and Jaanus about so-called Skyper project. The name Skyper was derived from Sky Peer, and the idea was to create a peer-to-peer Wi-Fi sharing network and then provide various ISP-like services on top, such as telephony service. So Toivo had just tried every existing VoIP program out there to see which one we could adopt for our Skyper network. But his conclusion was that none of them worked properly. So he suggested that we'd better develop our own protocol and client. 8 months later, we had dropped the Wi-Fi sharing network idea altogether, chopped the R off the name, and launched the first version of Skype. Talk about good timing. 2003 was the first year where laptop sales surpassed desktops. Not to mention that voice-capable broadband was taking off. People who have played civilization should realize what this picture represents. It's a technology tree. New technology always leans on existing technology, thus forming a graph of dependencies. And as I just mentioned, Skype was enabled by Gaza, laptops, and broadband internet. It's important to realize, though, that new technology does not appear automatically once its prerequisites are in place. It still takes an inventor to come up with an idea. And sometimes ideas can linger for hundreds, if not thousands of years, waiting to be discovered. My favorite example of delayed inventions are hot air balloons. They were invented by the Montgolfier brothers of France in 1782. However, the enabling technologies for them had been in place for thousands of years. If somebody had stumbled upon the idea, then in principle, the ancient Romans could have had air travel, and our history books would read completely differently now. Furthermore, as the technologies get more powerful, their timing matters more. Think about what the world would look like if the nuclear weapons would have been invented just a couple of decades earlier or later. Also, luckily, the laws of physics have been very kind to us so far by ensuring that nuclear weapons are hard to construct, even if you know how to construct them. But there is no guarantee that all future destructive inventions will be similarly difficult to implement. Sometimes I say that our planet seems to have gone through some kind of phase shift. Technological progress has replaced biological evolution as the dominant future-shaping force here. For instance, imagine an alien looking down on our planet and trying to predict our future. It would get its predictions hopelessly wrong if it only looked at the biological processes and ignored what's happening in technology. Furthermore, this dominant future-shaping force often channels through the heads of individual inventors, who then go on to determine the shape of the technology tree. So that is what I mean when I say that the future is fragile. The future is sensitive to the timing and order in which new technologies are introduced. Also, the historical turns get more dramatic as the technology gets more powerful, and ultimately, inventions are stemming from the thoughts and actions of individual people. People like Toivo sending that email proposing a new VoIP service. The rest of my presentation is about how you should behave when you find yourself at the crossroads of technological development, a moment where our entire future might hinge on your personal decisions. First of all, you should be careful not to be an amoeba. A friend of mine once put it very cynically. Technology developers, he said, are like amoeba, following the trail of money and status with a justification mechanism bolted on top. What he meant by that was that it is often easy to simply do what feels intuitively justified without thinking about the actual consequences of your actions. The problem, of course, is that those intuitions can often be misleading. For instance, it's easy to follow so-called expert consensus because people seldom blame you for that. But expert consensus is often wrong. This is a photo from the summer 2004, featuring the core Skype team and key investors. We had many great investors. What this photo does not show you, though, is that VCs were not interested in Skype before it had launched. And the reason was that expert consensus dismissed Skype as a toy. Not to pick on anyone in particular, but here's one example that stuck in my mind hard enough to dig it up a decade later. A renowned internet expert wrote that by using a homegrown protocol, Skype was bringing a knife to gunfight. The rejections we received from VCs boiled down to the same thing. Experts did not believe in Skype. Now, did the experts actually try the existing VoIP software that was out there, like Toivo did? I would be surprised if they did. In my experience, experts are more interested in, often at least, interested in repeating fashionable memes and thoughtful-sounding ideas than doing the legwork that's necessary to actually predict the future. I mean, the fact is that before Skype came along, the voice-over IP industry was a mess. Here's one Slashdot comment from 2004 describing how difficult it can be to get Skype alternatives to work. It lists a long gauntlet of setup procedures and configuration options, with the last item being to congratulate yourself, because you can now talk to other super technical people like you. So following experts is less useful than one might think. But what about social signals, such as the opinions of your peers and so-called common sense? After all, in Skype's case, it was the grassroots opinion of our users that eventually trumped the expert opinion. Well, as illustrated by this wonderful cartoon about the stock market, popular opinion and peer pressure are just as vulnerable to imitation and meme propagation as expert opinion is. If you can't see it, it reads, "I got a stock here that could really excel." And people overhearing, "Really excel? Excel? Sell? 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 Sell?" Until one of them goes, "Oh, this is madness. I can't take it anymore. Goodbye." And then people go, "Goodbye? Bye? 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 Bye?" If you have ever had Skype file transfer fail on you, blame imitation. When we introduced the feature, we've just mimicked the file transfer functionality of a Jabber client, another IAM client, instead of figuring out how file sharing should ideally work. One general problem with popular opinion is that it discounts future developments. People basically assume that the future is like today, only more so. That is, they think that future might bring us thinner phones and bigger TVs, but certainly nothing as transformative as the internet was. An example of future discounting is that if you ask people how long do they expect to live, the answers you get basically reflect the current life expectancy numbers. That is, numbers for people who were born 100 years ago. Not even trying to take into account the future developments in medicine, not to mention the small possibility that aging would be cured altogether. So following common beliefs is not good either. What about money? Well, money is usually awarded by the economy. However, the secret with the economy is that there's a man behind the curtain, or at least an invisible hand. If you're lucky, the economy is ruled by the free market. And having grown up in the Soviet Union, I certainly know how to appreciate that. The nice thing about free economy is that it approximates human values. Because if you make products that people want, the market will reward you. However, free markets cannot cover all human values. Consider the tragedy of the commons. Markets don't represent shared values, such as making sure we don't destroy our environment. The way I see it, ultimately both the economy and the free market are overruled by the laws of physics. That's why I'm never convinced when somebody puts forward an economical or social argument about how something is impossible, especially when talking about technologies that are potentially disruptive to the fabric of economy itself, such as artificial intelligence. For example, a super intelligent AI that's able to rearrange atoms at will is not going to care about the rules of the human economy. So in my view, if something is not ruled out by the laws of physics, it is possible. So don't be an amoeba. Blindly following the crumb trail of money and social status will not guarantee a better future. Instead, look behind the incentives, try to understand the mechanisms that generated them, and be conscious of where they are leading you. So what would be a good alternative to the amoeba trail? Which trail should you follow? Well, ideally you should try to maximize your positive impact. That is, pick your actions based on their expected effects on the world. Of course, this is easier said than done. But let me illustrate this with another personal example. 1st of September 2005, another pivotal moment in Skype history. Jaanus had just flown to Estonia from London to discuss the decision to sell Skype. To avoid being overheard, we had to retreat to the office parking lot. Of course, this topic was not new. We had met various suitors before. For example, here's Google M&A representatives teaching us drinking games in the spring of 2005. Google was very bullish about their own VoIP product, though, called Gtalk. So they did not agree to pay the asking price. But another company did.
I think you'll learn a lot from us, but I think we'll learn a lot from you too. So, welcome to eBay, and congratulations to Skype.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And if you guys, when we leave my team here, the Texans here tonight, if,
Be nice to them.
we do the famous 5 stages, don't tell me about it.
And the Milli Mallikas, of course.
And the what?
Now, had I followed my no amoeba advice myself? Not really. Luckily, my trail did not lead to the disaster. Despite the occasional reports of Skype being used to plan terrorist attacks, I think the net effect of Skype on the world has been positive. It became very clear to me, though, that I had been on rails, so to speak, because it was not obvious at all what should I do next. I even remember a friend of mine asking, "So, Jaan, how does it feel having your life's work done at such an early age?" Implying that it's all downhill from here. After some soul-searching, I came to realize that I really care about maximizing my positive impact on the world. But how do you make deliberate progress towards such an abstract goal? Well, here's a model that I ended up with. Picture the action of fastening a seatbelt. Because the future is uncertain, there is no guarantee that the seatbelt will actually help you. In fact, it might make things even worse. Yet on average, fastening the seatbelt is still a positive action because it reduces the number of negative scenarios and increases the number of positive ones. So this is what I mean when I say that an action has positive impact. Now, in order to maximize the impact, one should go from saving your own life to saving a lot of lives, possibly the entire planet. If you recall what I said earlier about the future being fragile, it should not surprise you that, in my view, the global equivalent of fastening the safety belt is to try to shape the technology tree to minimize risks and maximize opportunities for the entire humanity. To that effect, I have followed and supported a growing ecosystem of organizations that are doing research on how to survive the risks and tap into the opportunities. I call it the X-risk ecosystem after so-called existential risks. That is, dangers that can potentially wipe out the human species. Because there is no automatic or amoeba trail leading towards such research, very few people are doing it. For instance, the humanity spends less resources researching how to survive this century than it does on lipstick research. Therefore, if you want to multiply a positive impact on the world, supporting or even creating X-risk organizations is an easy way to do so. For example, here's a recent addition to the ecosystem that I'm partly responsible for, Cambridge Centre for the Study of Existential Risks. It was co-founded by British astronomer Royal Martin Rees, who hopefully will be speaking here later today, if his flight is not late. Cambridge philosopher Hugh Price, and yours sincerely. So in my view, instead of the amoeba trail, you should try to follow the path that leads you to the biggest possible positive impact, which in the context of technology development means predicting the effects of your inventions and minimizing scenarios where your technology ends up harming people, either accidentally or deliberately. That is, error or terror scenarios, as Martin Rees puts it. Now, the impact trail has one problem. It relies on predictions. As Niels Bohr once famously quipped, prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. Luckily, there is a way to reduce reliance on precise predictions. The way to reduce the reliance on predictions is to be humble. And I don't mean this in a social sense, but in a technical one, as defined by American AI researcher Eliezer Yudkowsky. To be humble is to take specific actions in anticipation of your own future errors, he said. Let me illustrate this with another story from Skype. We used to be rather smug about the frequent outages that our competitors, such as MSN, had. After all, it was impossible to have a global outage in a peer-to-peer system such as Skype, right? Then, of course, August 16th, 2007 happened. It took us half a day just to realize that the laws of physics did not include peer-to-peer architectures guaranteeing infinite uptime. When the realization finally dawned upon us, the core technical team was in for 2 memorable days and nights trying to rescue the Skype network. And here's a sample of what went on in the so-called war room.
Trend on nagu õiges suunas. Sukeldusi igas võtis umbes praegu. Nad ei tea, nad ei saa.
8 + 5. Meil ei ole mingi täid kohti vaja, meil on vaja saada üks muid kus asi säketreit välja.
Ei ole, lihtsalt on selle reitsala.
Kirjuti imasmise ja 21.
Pane mingi sleep sisse.
ID location just veidi.
10 minutit.
ID location just
Sleep straalia. 10 sekund sleep.
Jah, mul läheb ka meenuma, miks seda vaja on.
Poolas on 27, 28, 29.
Pane 5.
Ei, ta ei pea kiiresti respondima üldse.
Ei, idee on see, et muidu hakkavad igast jõudnud PQ-d täitama.
Austraalias. Mis see kooli nimi on? Sümbion. Austraalias. 129.
Ma lootnud, et juba asi improve'ib nagu mingil määral juba natuke enne sinna jõudmist, eks ole. Ja seda ei ole näha.
Mis see mõõdik on praegu see slot count?
See on jah see, mida me nagu järgime, mis on nagu...
Good morning!
Morning!
So it's been a fun, soon to be 24 hours. As you might have noticed, we have a little software issue.
Küll, jah?
Äkki sa paned need maha?
Ei oota, ära pane maha.
Maha pole vaja, aga mis asi sul on see 41,57? Need on Kopenhaageni asjad. Ei, ma saan aru, mis sa praegu jooksed.
Praegu jooksevad need 20-sed.
Okei, siin jooksevad siis kõigis nendes jooksevad 20-sed ka.
Ei ainult 20-sed, need suged on ära küli.
Just, ja siis lisaks jooksevad siin ka.
Mul on portide vahem ikka vaja teada.
Jah, nagu...
Ja kõik katavad mod 0.
No ma ei tea.
Kas see 250...
After that moment, it still took us about a half a day to get the network operational. So here's a rough explanation of what happened with the Skype network on that fateful day. Imagine a peer-to-peer network of ordinary computers. If one of them shuts down, its neighbors have to send out a few packets to the neighbors to inform them about this event, creating a blip of network traffic. We assumed that such events were random, so the resulting network reorganization traffic would be small and uniformly spread over time. Enter Windows Update. Once per month, entire time zone worth of Windows computers simultaneously restarts at 3 a.m. There goes our assumption. While Skype was small, this was not a problem. But by the summer of 2007, the network had grown large enough for these synchronized blips of traffic to grow into a shockwave. That shockwave started overwhelming other links, thereby creating a positive feedback loop in this network's self-reorganization traffic. Now, did you notice the list on the whiteboard? When Ahti started to investigate what was going on, he compiled a special version of Skype Supernode, and ran it on his home computer. As a result, it wasn't his computer that crashed, nor was it his network connection. Instead, the storm of traffic towards him took down his entire internet service provider. There were a couple more ISPs that died that night, even though we warned them before we put up Skype network servers on their network. And they seemed sure that the systems could take it. Clearly, the lack of technical humanity wasn't only Skype's problem. However, the lack of humility is also inexcusable if there's a lot at stake. Unforeseen things happen, so if you're inventing powerful technology or technology that others rely on, you must take concrete actions in advance, such as building in lots of safety margins. Also, please question your assumptions. It would probably have helped us if early on a friendly oracle would have whispered to us that peer-to-peer networks really can go down. And ideally, try to make your actions reversible. If unforeseen things happen, make sure you can back up to a safe place. So be humble to counteract the uncertainty in your predictions. More specifically, remember that reality can be more imaginative than you are. And use safety margins, question your assumptions, and have a plan for reversing your actions. Now finally, there's one more topic to cover. Assuming you have avoided the amoeba trail, made your own predictions with a positive impact in mind, and left ample margin for error by being humble, the question still remains, what kind of future should you be striving for? Apparently, this question gets very tricky once you get beyond the obvious saving lives scenarios. As moral philosophers can tell you, we simply don't have a final answer to what we humans really want. Luckily, there is a solid heuristic: maximize the amount of fun in the world, since more fun is almost always better than less fun. A good strategy to start with is to have fun yourself and be fun to other people. Remember that Fortune magazine story that we had to suffer freezing temperature for? It was titled, "Catch Us If You Can." And it started like this. Near the center of the walled medieval district of Estonia's capital, Tallinn, sits the Nuku bar. In Estonian, Nuku is an acronym for young culture, the private club, is full of 20-somethings in jeans drinking local beer to rock music. The bar's name has another meaning. Read as one word, it's slang for penis. Both the hidden nature and the cheeky attitude of the place fit perfectly with the company I'm here to meet. Here's Toivo talking about that cheeky attitude.
Ma üles tulin netist, seal olid 2 tüdrukut. Ma vaatan mulle otsa, rääkisid enne midagi elavad. Ma küsin nendele, et ma olen seltskonna juurde, üks seltskond on. Ütlesid ja, Skype. Ütlesid ja, et sinna ma just lähengi midagi sellist, et teate küll, et mul on natuke imelikult. Et selle peale kurstavad naerma, et jah, on ja küsisin, et mis te ajate, et see on tõsi, et jah, on küll, et me just omavahel rääkisime seda.
Indeed, Skypers were weird, but always in a fun, maximizing way. For instance, let's take Skype's leaders. Remember the eBay welcome dinner video? The man saying that he didn't want to know that if his team went on to do the 5-phase Skype night, it was eBay's chief operating officer. Well, this is Michael, Skype's chief operating officer at the time. As you can see, he's an amphibious CEO that is able to operate both on land and in water. This is Niklas, while being sued by the music industry for, quote, aiding and abetting massive music piracy. This is Skype's management team on a panel discussion. Cute, aren't they? And this is Toivo showing off his leadership and resource management skills. Some more pictures from Skype parties. This is Skype's secretary, Curly. The first version of the Echo Want Your Free service that you can use to test your connection was voiced by her, a fact that she cashed out by winning one of the costume contests at one of the Skype parties. This is, well, too complicated to explain. Some of the pictures from that party I really can't show, but let's just show that Skype's hidden pool party emoticon was based on real-world events. This is a party where people ended up dancing on tables and walls. Similar to the reception curls in Toivo's story, the local staff seemed to form a rather distinct opinion of Skypers. But don't get me wrong, Skypers did not need to party in order to be quirky and have fun. For example, here on the left is business development lead Scott at a strategy meeting in the morning, and this is him in the evening continuing the discussion via other methods. His target is Skype's first employee, Taavet. Here he's just being his normal self in the office. This is head of development, Stefan. He's using a doll to illustrate the difficulties in running a development team while other teams are trying to steal his resources. The demonstration did not end well for the doll. And here's Skype's general counsel, Rob, playing the role of a Fortuna in a credit card roulette after a dinner in an expensive Michelin star restaurant. I still have painful memories of what happened next. Now, have you noticed how nice it is when the pilots of your airplane sound cheerful over the intercom? Similarly, one reason why it helps to have technology developers to be quirky and fun-loving is that it's in everyone's interest to have the future to be shaped by people who appreciate life. The value of fun goes much deeper, though. You see, while positive emotions like happiness and pleasure are important, they leave the world outside massively underspecified because they refer to subjective states of mind. And there are various shortcuts one can take to achieve them, such as taking drugs or meditating. In contrast, fun usually refers to objective processes in the external world. So when optimizing for fun, there are fewer shortcuts than one can take, and hence the risk of unintended consequences is much smaller. One intuitive way to see that it is to look at what makes a good game design. A good game is optimized to be maximally fun versus maximally addictive or happy, whatever that means. Like a good game, we want our future to be maximally fun, offer a lot of progress and excitement, but probably also a fair share of challenges and setbacks for contrast. So that's what I mean when I say that fun is fundamental. You can create happiness out of fun, but not fun out of happiness. Therefore, I urge you to be fun, have fun, and increase the amount of fun there is in the world. So that's pretty much what I had to say. If I could leave you with just one more picture, a picture to compress my entire talk into one slide, it would be this. Technology development is like a steering wheel. When turning it, don't be an amoeba. Instead, be humble and head for the mountains of fun. And don't forget, the entire world is riding in the back. Thank you.